I'd
like to make a motion to consider approval of the minutes of the special committee of the whole meeting held on June 5th, 2018.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 3, discuss change order with PT Farrell Construction Company for the fiscal year 2019 PMP Street Resurfacing Program. Kevin, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we're recommending to add on 7 additional streets into Odyssey. Due to, when we looked at the entrance was in real bad shape. We didn't originally add these in because we were going to leave this as a construction road until the rest of the area was developed. Since this is the main road going into the Odyssey, we've had some complaints on, if we could get it all done. We do have sufficient funds collected from the homeowners there to complete all these streets. It's an additional $215,000, which we have the money in the budget collected from the homeowners. So this is to add on the 7 additional streets. This way the whole area would be completed and then be cheaper because we're already mobilized out there. So,
Mr. Chairman, this has been an issue that's been ongoing for a year or two now, right? Can you give the board maybe a little history on, I know there was some it's a gated community, right?
yeah, it's a gated community. The streets are really private, but they pay us to maintain the roads on their water bill. They give us so much money per water bill to maintain the streets. So that includes street sweeping, repairing the roadway, which is in the agreement we had that we have to abide by. We have the sufficient funds to take care of it, but it's just for the maintenance of the streets. They really own the streets, we just maintain them.
Okay. They handle their own streetlights, I believe, correct?
Yeah, their own streetlights they handle.
And you've had a couple of meetings with the association there, I assume, right?
Yes, we have.
That's been a couple years in the making.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just thinking of issues that people may raise on, and I don't know if we ever addressed fully that.
Well, I had a meeting with the homeowner representatives about 2 months ago, and that was where the concern of the entrance road came.
Okay.
As we were following up that we were proceeding with some resurfacing work, and so we went and revisited it and found that indeed the road did need to have maintenance, and that we did have sufficient funds to do it, and it was just seemed to be most expedient to do the whole thing and get it all done.
So for the future, after this is done, the funding element that we have in place for that community, is that going to be substantial enough for future repairs?
I have done projections going forward to the next point,
Okay.
where, including the regular maintenance that we incur, as well as the more significant PMP maintenance, we will have sufficient funds.
Thank you, Brad.
And just to be clear, these are special assessments apart and aside from the regular taxes everybody else pays.
There is a special charge that they pay, yes.
Any other questions? Make a motion to put this on the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Before discuss Harp Group, Tinley Park Convention Center. Dave, you want to give your
I'm going to
presentation?
do a presentation here. Seems like it's loaded up here on the basically kind of the status of the Holiday Inn Convention Center agreements. This is something, as the board is aware, we've been working on for about a year. We were actually approached by the current owners, Mid-Continent, about a year ago they were approached by the Harp Group, and actually the president, Peter Dumont, is in the audience today and certainly can address any questions. Harp Group, Peter, they're a well-known, successful hotel developer in the Chicago area that was looking to buy the Holiday Inn and take over management of the convention center. Again, the way our structure is right now is the owners of the Holiday Inn essentially are also managers. We have a separate convention center management agreement with them. When we heard it, I think it was it was good. I think the fact that we're getting a developer of the Harp Group's capacity, and we were excited to hear that the plans are to bring a Sheraton or a similar brand that will attract more conventions. In the convention world, and Peter can explain this to you, conventions often want, certain types of conventions look for a certain type of brand. the Holiday Inn is a great place, but there are some convention centers that want to see something like a Sheraton or Marriott. So we're very confident that one of the major advantages of this new structure will be to attract more convention business to our already successful convention center. And we've also talked with the Harp Group about a desire at some point to expand the hotel. And in very simple terms, what this will do for us is this will increase business not just in Holiday Inn / Sheraton, but will increase businesses in all the Village's hotels and restaurants, which would of course result in a corresponding increase in tax revenue for the Village. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the current convention center agreement. This actually was a 20-year agreement that was from the original one was an addendum that was done in 2008. It expires in 2028. I will tell you, tied into the TIF, we were actually in the process of renegotiating this agreement anyway with the current owners, and I'll get into that a little bit later. The major challenge, as you're all aware of, is that this is a great location in terms of accessibility from the highway, visibility, but it's an extreme challenge for businesses because of its location in Cook County and specifically Rich Township, and it's because that is the highest property tax areas of the entire village. So, and this is it's a very striking example. When I first learned this, when we were talking with the old owners a couple years ago, just as one example, the current Holiday Inn property tax bill is just under $1.6 million. The next highest one in Will County is $229,000. So it's remained competitive. We've had to do some creative things with the use of the TIF, and with the TIF expiring, we've had to brainstorm some different ideas, but let me get into a little bit of that. Convention Center Hotel, that would not have been built without a TIF. That area really, and I'll talk about it a little bit here, is just, and Brad has talked about this at previous TIF meetings. Out of all of our TIFs, this has been by far the most successful in terms of revenue generated. And it's generated over $60 million in TIF revenue to date, probably one of the most successful TIFs in the state. And again, benefits certainly accrue to the Holiday Inn, but they accrue to hotels nearby, they accrue to restaurants, bars, and other places nearby. And in fact, last year, the convention center generated over $500,000 in businesses for hotels, in addition to in addition to the business that's at the Holiday Inn. So the current agreement, again, reflecting back to the situation with the tax bill, what we did is over the life of the TIF, since the convention center was built, is that there's been TIF subsidies of $860,000, which partially, not completely, but partially offsets that high tax bill. And that includes a $185,000 contribution towards capital improvements in the convention center and $675,000 towards other expenses. And again, the TIF ends this year, and for that convention center and hotel to continue going and to continue to operate, we really needed to come up with some creative way to continue to make it financially feasible. And so one of the things that we looked at, one of the benefits of a TIF is that all the taxing bodies, but especially the school districts, which are the two biggest districts, they're going to see a large increase in the assessed value. And so they'll be able to use that to help with their services and with their capital improvements. And so with that, we had some discussions with both the Harp Group and with the school districts. And where we're at now is that we've had discussions about the subsidy. For the initial part of the agreement, and we're looking at a 20-year agreement, is that the subsidy would be reduced from $860,000 to $750,000 per year. And one of the key component of this is that the school districts, 227 and 159, the high school and grade school districts, along with the village, would reduce the property taxes on this for 50% per year up until the total abatement reaches $4 million. And we're estimating that to roughly be about 7 years. So again, that's still, what that leaves is there's the 50% that they get on the hotel site, but they get 100% of everything else that's currently in the TIF. So even though we're asking them to contribute towards it, there's still a sizable increase in the assessed value, which will help both of those districts. Part of our discussions with the school districts, and it's understandable, was, okay, if we're going to do this, what's going to be the village's contribution? And obviously our tax levy is a portion of it, but our tax levy is a much smaller portion of the tax bill compared to the 2 school districts. So, they asked us, what else can the village do? And I think after looking at some brainstorming and talking with the HARP group and looking at some other deals in other communities, is that we're proposing that we levy an additional 1% tax on village hotels. This would actually make up the difference. We're estimating now that the tax abatements would create about $675,000 in revenue. And so there's about a $75,000 shortfall. And so that would go partially towards the shortfall. And then the rest of this, we would have funds set aside that can go towards branding and marketing efforts. As you all are aware, we have a very ambitious branding program that once the Plaza gets up and running, there's going to be some significantly new costs, and we want to be able to put these monies back in where we can kind of help the hotels and better market tourism in the village. So what we're still working on is really what happens once the abatement ends, because again, in the HARP group, it's understandable to make a commitment like this, wants a longer term commitment, and we want them to make a longer term commitment. And so we would be looking at trying to extend the abatement. If we can't extend it, we would be basically putting a larger share of our hotel tax dollars for it. Basically, we would be looking at up to the full share for the Holiday Inn / Sheraton property. I know we still have been working the last few days on the final details of what the cap would be on that. It would be, I think at this point, less than the amount that in the abatement, but that's something we're still working on. We would not be responsible for funding the major capital improvements for the convention center as we have in the past, and the HARP group would be responsible for paying 5% of the gross receipts generated from the center into a capital improvement fund. We're also, as part of the agreement, we're going to use $400,000 from the TIF to resurface the parking lot. I think as you've been over there, it's definitely due for resurfacing. And we would get reduced rentals on up to 10 events per year. As you all know, we have a number of events there per year, so that would greatly assist us. Finally, the high school. So really there's actually 3 agreements that we'll be asking the board to approve. And our goal is to have that done at our next board meeting. There's the actual convention center agreement, and I've given you the highlights of those, and we still need to, again, finalize the final piece of what happens after the first 7 years of the agreement. But there will also be 2 separate abatement agreements that will involve the village, 227 and 159. As I understand it, the high school has approved their agreement. Not sure if 159 is scheduled theirs yet, but they're scheduled. Okay, yeah. So the hope is that that one will be approved before the July 17th meeting. Separately, I know Peter worked very hard and was very accommodating towards some of the concerns of the 2 school districts in terms of setting up hospitality internship program there. I think the high school was looking for some help with some cooking facilities, and there was also an agreement on discounted rates there. So we appreciate the fact that he's recognized the needs of the high school and the grade school, and we do appreciate the fact that they've stepped up here. This is kind of an unusual agreement, with the multi-parts to it. the abatements in the hotel, but it's very satisfying to recognizing that I think that all of the major taxing bodies recognize this is a major asset to not only the village, but the entire school district. And this agreement, we have a great convention center, we have a great hotel, but the potential is even higher with the Sheraton, and now with the TIF ending, the school districts are going to reap the benefits of this, and we'll start to see more sales in hotel tax. So this is an exciting venture. This is a creative deal, again, really primarily because of the Cook County Rich Township tax situation, but we think it can be successful, and we're really here to answer any questions that you may have, and I know Peter can certainly speak to his experience or answer any questions on his end. So
We don't have a copy of the agreement yet, right? It's still being worked out?
it's still being fleshed out,
So
yeah.
hoping by the end of the week, Mike.
Yeah.
that you'd have it.
And I'm assuming we'll get it as soon as,
Yeah.
you know.
So I don't know, would be appropriate to maybe just have Peter at least introduce himself and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about, yeah.
Thank you, Dave. First of all, I'd like to thank Dave and Greg and the trustees and the mayor for inviting me here tonight. It's been certainly an enormous amount of work going on behind the scenes, as Dave just outlined. I think we're extremely close on getting this all wrapped up. When this opportunity presented itself several months ago, almost a year at this point, I believe, we took a look at it, and in terms of the branding on the hotel, you may remember the hotel was built as what was known as a Holiday Inn Select, and then Intercontinental Hotels Group, which is the parent company of Holiday Inn, got rid of that branding, and so all of those hotels were forced to kind of down-brand themselves to a Holiday Inn. And Holiday Inn is a very reputable, very solid brand, and we actually have a few others throughout around the country that we own. So happy to own and operate Holiday Inns. That being said, connected to the convention center is not typically where you would see a Holiday Inn brand. So we looked at the current Holiday Inn agreement, which does go until December of 2020. So after we acquire the hotel, it will remain a Holiday Inn until the end of 2020. At that point, we expect to do a substantial renovation and convert. Our thinking is right now to a Sheraton. Sheraton was part of Starwood. Starwood and Marriott merged last year, I believe, and they're in the process of getting that a lot of their post-merger technology integration done. So once that's completed, and that'll be done in a couple of months, you're going to have a company in Marriott fully absorbed. All of the Starwood brands, which are Westin, Sheraton, W, St. Regis, Luxury Collection, and then with all the Marriott brands, you're going to have, I think, 31 or 32 brands within Marriott, which is enormous. So, and also then combining those two frequent guest programs, those two reservation systems, is going to be incredibly impactful for that travel system. And for people that travel frequently, they're typically loyal to one or two systems. And Marriott and Starwood had, in my opinion, the two best res systems and reservation systems and loyalty programs. And now having those two combined, it's going to be very, very powerful. What I viewed as really unique to this Tinley Park opportunity is, in most areas of the country, including, or especially so in major metropolitan areas like Chicago, if you would pull up Marriott.com, there would be all kinds of product even before the Starwood merger. In this particular case, there's a Fairfield Inn and Suites in the market, and that's it. There's no other Marriott product here now. I'm sure that's going to change as they look to get more hotels here, but just putting the Sheraton flag on it will be will have a significant impact. As it relates to the convention center, Marriott's national group sales team for this type of facility is significantly more robust than what Holiday Inn has. So that the convention center will be a beneficiary of that, as will all the other hotels in the market, as we bring more groups in and hopefully try to raise the profile and the price point of the groups that are coming through. They also, as part of their frequency or loyalty programs, they have special programs for meeting planners that Holiday Inn does not have. So effectively, meeting planners that, book groups into Marriott hotels, they get points that they can use on their own personal time. So that's another benefit that'll come as part of branding with Sheraton. That being said, that investment, we anticipate will be an $8 to $9 million investment in the current facility to get it to the Sheraton standard. The great news is the Stillman family that currently owns the hotel built a fantastic hotel. The room size is great. The HVAC system is up to standard for a much better brand than what it currently enjoys. The bathrooms are big. They've got standalone showers and tubs in many of the rooms, and the room size, as I mentioned, is fantastic. So, that will entail a full, guest room case good replacement, carpet, full guest room bathroom renovation, public area renovation, restaurant renovation. So the whole thing is going to be, effectively everything you see, touch, and feel there now inside the hotel will be replaced. So it'll be a significant upgrade in terms of the physical product quality, and we think a more appropriate brand for the facility. So in terms of expansion, there was, I believe, an expansion approved in the past. From a logistical perspective, in keeping the existing hotel operating cleanly, first through the renovation. We think that the an expansion of guest rooms there is certainly going to be appropriate, but it's probably going to be a separate hotel, located very near to where the existing one is, and obviously that brings with it a whole set of approvals, plan commission and village board. So, but that is something that we are examining and excited about down the road. As we continue to raise the profile of the convention center, I think that'll be more business at the and higher rated business at what is currently there. It will support, we think, some new rooms on the location, and then also provide citywide impact for all of the other hotels within Tinley Park. So we're looking at this as a kind of a positive feedback loop for the entire community, both in terms of the hotels, restaurants, sales tax base, that type of thing. In terms of who we are, I started the Harp Group 21 years ago now. We're headquartered in the western suburbs in Westmont, and we've developed well over $500 million worth of hotels and acquired well over $1 billion in the last 20 years. We have a hotel management affiliate called Portfolio Hotels and Resorts that manages the 16 hotels that we own, and then an additional 9 more, so for a total of 25 throughout the country. We're approved by every major brand family for both ownership and franchising and management. And we operate in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, New York, North Carolina, Florida, Colorado, and in California right now, and then we've got a couple of deals under contract, one in Arizona and one in Minnesota. So we continue to grow our platform. In terms of the agreements and commitments we've made to the school district, they're going to be putting in a new kitchen facility, so we're going to do some consulting for them to make sure that they put in the best kitchen technology. There is some really cool stuff going on right now in kitchen technology and banquets, and it'll give those students a leg up in terms of possible careers in the hospitality industry. We're going to have 3 internship positions at any given time. So the idea is that in each quarter, will be 3 new interns, and those will be paid internships. So we'll be, reaching at least 12 students per year. The other part of their agreement is that anytime we have a major construction project going on, whether it's the renovation or if we put something new out there, we'll have construction internships for some of the high school students. And then I know the elementary district also said they might be putting in a kitchen facility, so we're happy to help them out as well. And then also looking for a very long-term partnership. This is something we expect to own for at least 10 years and probably double that. It's an opportunity that is in our backyard. We like it, and are very excited to get a deal done with the village and the school districts and move towards a closing in the very near future. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got.
Do you have any questions?
No?
No, appreciate all your
Thank you so
hard
much,
work
Peter.
over the last couple months working on this, to you and your attorney, and certainly the village staff and the school districts for having an open mind and with the understanding that without this agreement, it wouldn't be a very successful project over there. And we appreciate the opportunity that you see for Tinley Park and look forward to your future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 5, discuss employee pay plan. Dave?
All right, switching gears. So, this is a project, those who've been on board for a couple of years, it's, we've been working on it for some time, and this is, tonight, really the purpose, again, no votes tonight, but just to kind of give you a status update, and I think with the desire that we would be taking action at the next meeting. But first, what I want to kind of do is just give you a little bit of history. So in fall of 2016, the village hired PayPoint. We went out for proposals, interviewed multiple firms, and this was really the village's first comprehensive pay plan and market survey in more than a decade. And it was very comprehensive. It included a review of all positions except vacant, did not include public works or police union positions and some fire department positions. We went through the first process that the board was involved in, is to kind of determine your comparatives. And it was at, I think, a committee of the whole meeting here where the board reviewed and approved the comparative communities within 30 miles of Tinley Park. That also the board approved basically, essentially what you need to do when you develop a pay plan is determine where you want to be in the market. And so the recommendation was 60th. There's been a point in time back in the far past when the village, there's been discussion, I think the village has been at 70th. So what this means is essentially you're trying to get your community and your employees to be, above the average, not wildly above the average, but 60th percentile is above average in terms of at least your comparable communities. So we initially presented a draft plan to the board in mid 2017 that had some initial recommendations. The next step in a process like that is having HR essentially revise job descriptions, finalize the recommendation. As you all know, around that same time, we went through employee transitions in the department. Late in 2017, we had a temporary director hired. We had an outside person come in to help us with some of the job descriptions and making kind of final recommendations. As we went through this, and and I think the PayPoint proposal provided us with a good structure. Many of the pay recommendations we did accept, but we also wanted to make sure that it was as accurate and fair and affordable as possible. So there were some things that we did change, and some things we thought that could be better. One of them, for example, is the original plan had a much larger number of steps. We had some positions where the low-end pay, frankly, was not realistic to attract quality talent to the market. At the same time, some of the high-end pay was way above the market. Some of the step differentials were varied, and we thought were not appropriate for the market. One of the things, and this was a challenge, we knew when I think this was approved, there was a desire to do some private sector comparisons, and we tried to do them for some positions. The challenge you have, which I kind of warned at the time, is one, it's hard getting good data because private sector doesn't always want to share that data. And then the comparisons were not necessarily even, and the challenge is even when we had comparisons, for example, you might have one position in a department, the deputy clerk, for example, was one where we found it, but then we didn't find it for other positions, so it really made for very inconsistent results. Some of the data that he had, we thought the sample sizes weren't big enough. And I know one of the things Trustee Panito, because he was in charge of this committee, really wanted us to get we have a merit portion component to our pay plan now, but we wanted to make sure that it was more robust and stronger. And we thought that we needed a larger portion of that than what the consultant recommended. So, basically, here's what we essentially, have recommended. And in your packet, there's a number of backups. I'm not going to spend tonight going through the spreadsheets, but there's backups that shows what the pay point recommendations were, what our recommendations are, so you can see the differential, what the current pay ranges are for all the positions. So there's a lot there, and again, I'd be happy really to talk with you individually on all of these between now and the next 4 weeks to make sure you're comfortable with them. And in there is also very detailed spreadsheets on the positions that are being recommended for adjustments due to the market study. So, but here's in summary, we've made separate recommendations. And again, this was not what PayPoint did, but our recommendations are different for management and non-management. So for non-management, those employees remaining on the step plan, the steps would remain at the current number, which is 10, and the distance between steps at 3.8% for most positions. And again, to go back, so steps, I know this isn't always something that you see in the private sector. Typically what you do is you'll hire somebody in when they're in the beginning, they haven't accumulated all the skills and experience. So I like to call it almost like an apprentice pay, where you pay somebody at a lower rate, and then as they develop more skills and experience, you get additional steps over time. And so that's kind of how I would explain steps. But what we've done is that we're really now having a more increased emphasis on evaluating merit with a points-based system. So in the past, you could get a step increase, and how you got a step increase was that you had to have a satisfactory evaluation. To be very blunt, and this isn't just this community, the practice is most people get that. And that's very common in most municipalities, but we wanted to go a step beyond that and say, okay, it's not just either you are successful or not, there's degrees of successfulness. And so what we're recommending is a point system where you might get a full step increase if you've had a very successful year, if you've accomplished a lot of your goals, but not all the goals we wanted to, you would get a half step, and if you obviously are well below accomplishing goals, then you would not get anything, and it would be based on performance. So we're going to be completely revising our non-management evaluation forms. We're actually going to create a committee, and we're going to look for input not just from managers, but from line employees on the best way to do that. And all this, and I'm going to talk about this later, is going to start May 1st next year. You really need to give people time to break in the system to make sure it's done right. And we're also going to give people the eligibility to get bonuses if it's performance-based. And at this point, it would be limited if you're going through steps to 2 over that time frame. And again, we've got a bonus systems now. The bonus system now is really what we call an exemplary performance system. I want to make it more quantifiable, and so that's going to be kind of the framework of the non-management position. So management positions, and I will tell you, and it's a slow trend, but when I was in my last position, we did this, and we're actually going to be recommending that the step plans for management completely go away May 1st next year. So essentially what that means is it will be all merit. And basically, this year, again, because to give time to make the adjustment, we would still be looking for the annual market wage adjustment, and employees who are eligible for step increases, whether it be management or non-management, would still get that. But starting next year, May 1st, there would be no market wage adjustment or no step increases for management. And there will be a new management evaluation form that was included in your packet. This is one that I've actually, I copied this from another community I worked in. Denise made some very good suggestions to kind of improve it, but it's going to focus on very specific leadership management criteria, looking at things like budgeting, resolution skills, proactivity, planning, and organizing. communication, and a number of other factors. So how this would work with management, so I'm going to talk now about, so how is different employees going to be affected by this? So really, from a management position, when it's on merit, it means you with no step or no market wage, you could get anywhere from 0 to whatever the approved range is. Now, I will tell you the key to success is you've got to have a large enough range to give people the motivation to be successful. And so if you have something, frankly, if you're giving all other employees 2.5% market wage adjustments, and then some employees who are on steps are still getting them, and you do 0 to 2% as merit, that's not going to be looked at as a fair system for management. We had, in my last year in Oak Brook, we had a range of 0 to 4%. Not everybody got 4%, not everybody got 3%. I had some people that got 1%. Frankly, if people are getting 0%, they probably shouldn't be in management anyway. So, but I mean, that's going to be one of the key things, is you've got to make it high enough that people are motivated and people feel like there's something that they can really strive for. So that's how management work. Again, non-management, so if they're at the top of the range, they would get no steps. They would get only the annual market wage adjustment, which this year we're recommending a 2.5%. And then non-management going through steps, as I mentioned earlier, it would be the market wage adjustment plus a step increase depending on the number of points. So if it's a half step, it's 1.9, full step, 3.8. And then the bonus plan, which we talked about earlier. And again, police and public works, because they're union contracts, they would still get the market wage adjustments, and they're basically eligible for full step increases based on tenure. So essentially now you've really got, the way it's being proposed, essentially 3 different systems. You'll have the management system, you'll have the non-management system, and then the system that union employees receive. So separately from this, again, one part of this was updating the pay plan, and that's the highlights of what I've just given you. Separately from this is we want to make sure that all of our positions were paid according to market. What I included in here, what PayPoint did initially is they showed positions above, at, or below the market. We made some revisions to this, and again, I'd be happy to go through data on individual positions. Based on everything I mentioned at the beginning, looking at, we had some positions that didn't have sufficient data, some positions we thought were not good comparables. Our results were a little bit different, but one of the things that PayPoint had recommended to really reach market on all their positions would have cost the village roughly about $300,000 in the first year, and we recognize that's just a lot to ask in today's day and age. And so what we did working with HR is that as we spread this out over 4 years, we capped any adjustment, even ones where the market showed the increases could be warranted more than 15%, we capped them at 15% over those 4 years. And so our costs, and I'll say this is tentative, and I'll explain a little bit later, is the first year cost is a little over $24,000, and the 4-year cost is about $142,000. So I say that's tentative because, again, we're presenting this to you first. We'll be asking you to approve this hopefully at the next meeting. We also, I've shared this information with the department heads. We have not shared this detailed information with the employees. We will be giving employees the right to certainly appeal if they feel they're classified wrong or the data's wrong. So could that move numbers up and down here? Yeah, certainly. We're going to try to be fair, but yeah, they'll have to fall in these parameters, and obviously we will not be making adjustments above the 15% no matter what. So some next steps. One of the things I did not touch on, It's not included in here is the fire department, HR and forest. We've been working very, very closely with them. This is really kind of a different animal. One, because as you know, not a lot of part-time departments out there. The fire department has also, there is a part-time, they don't have a step plan. And one of the things I think we want to give the opportunities for some growth to incentivize people to stay longer. There's also separately a stipend plan now, which they get for various certifications. We're still looking at all that. And so this is really a little bit different animal. We're going to be addressing that and coming back with separate recommendations on that at a later date. But as I mentioned earlier, for the rest of this, we would be looking at asking you to approve this along separately with a market wage adjustment of 2.5. That's in line with what we've approved over the last few years. Recognizing that this is a new plan, you know, I think it's innovative. It's new. There may be some tweaks we need to make. We want to look at this after a year. And I think the key is that what we just don't want to do is part of why this took so long, and there was some change, is that, you know, we haven't really done something like this in 10 years. And really most experts in HR will recommend, really at a minimum, you do salary surveys, look at your whole pay plan at least every 3 years. And so we won't be doing this enormous legwork that we've had to do. So again, so tonight, really here to answer questions. I really do want to thank Denise, and I think everybody's met Paul. She's been with us for how long?
Since January.
Since January, kind of helping us with the final steps, and has produced enough spreadsheets for me to go blind, but I'm still seeing. And they've done a really good job at kind of getting this to close to a final fruition, and yeah, so happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions of the plan?
So Dave, by July 17th, you want to do all the fire and the new evaluation?
Yeah,
I don't know. We
Have
wouldn't be
all
ready
that
to
done by
approve the
then?
fire on the 17th. No,
Okay.
no, we'll bring the fire back. I mean, we'll have to talk about whether it be through a COW or finance committee. I want to bring that to a separate committee. So I'd like to at least get the market wage adjustment on the 17th. It's only because typically we approve the market wage adjustment in May. People have been waiting, and I told them, look, I didn't want to bring this to the board until we had a chance to look at everything. You know, I know there's a lot here. If we need another committee or COW to review the details or review it with the board one-on-one, I'd be glad to do this, but I'd like to get this pay plan approved, hopefully July 17th. If not, the meeting after that. You have to give me feedback, you know, what you need and you know, how much more you need to get from me, I guess, to help make a decision.
Sorry, I missed the beginning, Dave. How did we go about the doing the proposed? Because some of them I'm seeing that the pay point says that they're one rate, that they're not making enough. They don't get a raise, and then some of them says that they should be making more, and then they jump right up. Just doesn't seem like any rhyme or reason to it.
Okay, well, so basically, if you're looking at the sheet we were talking about earlier, that draft side, is that the one?
Yeah.
So the draft side-by-side comparison. Yeah, so that basically, that sheet is really, and that's a critical sheet because it shows current, it shows what we're recommending, what pay point did, and then explains in the last column, there's some that says no change to pay rate, and then some that says not included in pay point studies, so we collected our own data, or there may be other reasons. So an explanation of each position, and if it was status quo, it says so, and if there was a change, it explains why there was a change. So, and there's also in the packet, so all the positions where we're recommending adjustments doing to the market, we actually included all the backup survey data. This is not the backup survey data for every position, but it's the backup survey data for every position where there's recommended increases. So It shows the current salaries, it shows the verification that we did either from the other towns or from a public salary, which is an online service. So you have all that too.
I guess some of them, I don't want to discuss them openly, so maybe, like you said, I could sit down and talk to you, because some of these just,
Yeah, I need to sit down too. Maybe
Yeah, and that might be
you
the
or
best thing, 'cause
Denise, or
it's-
we do it together, or
Yeah. Yeah,
it's a
we-
lot. It's really small too.
Yeah, yes, yes, I know, yes, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Number 6, Lakota Plaza Agreement. Scott?
Yes, we asked Scott Ferris from the Lakota Group to come here this evening. Most of you have met him before. He's here to present sort of the culmination of the phase that we started back almost a year ago, over a year ago, May 2017, on the Business Programming and Marketing Action Plan. And it's important to kind of have him recap where we've been since the open house we had late fall, December of last year, if I remember correctly, and then talk about where we're going, and that's on the board this evening in terms of our next steps. So, Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Paula. Scott Ferris, principal with the Lakota Group, and thank you, Mr. President and trustees, for being here. I didn't even realize it's been that long of a process, because
I
it
know.
had many gyrations and many pathways that it went down. But we are, I think we're at a really nice place this evening, where we have a conceptual plan that we're comfortable with in terms of the general design character. We've been working diligently with our steering committee. I'm looking at Trustee Berg and Trustee Glotz over the last 6 to 8 months to come up with a range of options that have led not only to a good plan, but as part of our task, we were also asked to look at a business model that looks at what are the associated costs and what are the opportunities to market this plaza and program this plaza to get the most out of it for the community. It's one thing to build bricks and mortar, but if you can't program it, you can't activate it with life, it's useless. And that's the most important thing. It has to have space that people want to be in, that you can program, that generates tax dollars out of it, that it enlivens community spirit, makes people proud of it and want to be there. I think no different than what you talked about with your hotel and convention center tonight. It's getting more out of the things that you have and maximizing their potential. And I think that's what our process was. I'm just going to go through briefly the overall process that we went through, where we're at, where we're going, and I think that leads to your discussion this evening. The key topics are the design and planning process, the concept plan direction that we've gone through, the business planning and programming. I'll talk a little bit about the next steps and timeline and then implementation. Some of these last step items are newer to those of you that have been involved, but are equally important on our journey moving this forward. Our design and planning process, as we mentioned, had an extensive engagement component to it. We reached out to not only having a steering committee that helped guide us in terms of the ideas and thoughts and input really from an internal standpoint, but we also worked with those folks we spoke to on the outside, stakeholders, property owners, other board members, community residents, and we culminated all of that in bringing lots of great ideas to a community open house where we had great feedback. Some of the images of that are up on the screen before you. We also held an online survey to take in input to the ideas, the thoughts, and the details that were part of the plans. We had great success and input on that as well, which we're very proud of, because you usually don't get a lot of input on an online basis, and we were able to do that, which helped really cross-fertilize some of the anecdotal data that we were getting from people just in conversation. So very successful. From a design standpoint, I went through a number of different case studies. We came up with a number of different ideas. We presented all those. We looked at those. But the important part behind the design of this plaza was working within the confine of a target area that we were looking at. So while we started out very globally, where's the best place for a plaza, we quickly ended up on that area of village-owned land just north of North Street, generally along Oak Park Avenue, bounded on the south by North Street, 173rd and 67th, that would cut through it on a north-south on access. The important thing there was village ownership and then better understanding the context of parcels that were around this plaza. I think we had the conversation very early on our steering committee. You're all uniquely aware of opportunity for redevelopment on and around this plaza. As I spoke to, activating the plaza with programs and people is one thing. Activating the plaza with new development around it is another thing. And equally important, we want to put life and bodies around this. And so through our journey of this, we talked about mixed-use development. We talked about the idea of residential development. We talked about the idea of commercial development, new commercial development, and also existing commercial development. One of the key themes that came out of this, if nothing else, was maintaining a sense of character of our community as part of this process. And that came out loud and clear in the people we talked to with regards to dealing with our Oak Park Avenue frontage. Our Oak Park Avenue frontage is important. There's a vestige of buildings that represent that area just north of North and the tracks that really represent the character and flavor of Tinley Park. We didn't want to see that lost. We wanted to see that integrated into this design somehow, some shape, and that's evident in the plans and ideas that we've come up with. We also looked at a range of development options, many of which are still in flux as part of a bigger discussion of redevelopment in the downtown, but equally important to help shape the conversation of what this final plan concept is. Thank you very much. I've had like a cough for like the last week. The important thing that I'm putting up here is that we have a concept plan direction. And concept plan direction means that we've narrowed down all of the components that we think are the important components to put into space that we control, that's publicly owned land. There's a number of parcels we'll talk about in just a second, but the image that you see before you represents the general character of the plaza and the space that we're working with. The buildings, the white buildings that you see on what would be the left-hand side of the drawing, the one closest to us on the bottom, just to give you a reference point, is T-Hens. So that is kind of the corner, that 100% corner. The white building that just goes to the north of it, we saw that as opportunity for future redevelopment. And the only reason we're showing those white buildings to the north are to give us a sense of anchoring or balancing what could be on one side of the plaza, because we know that's an active commercial street, Oak Park Avenue, and we don't want to not have the opportunity to have retail on there. So the plaza itself goes north-south from what we call Festival Street, which is North Street, on up to 173rd, another Festival Street. And you'll see on the right-hand side of that drawing another white road that comes through the site, which is really an extension of 67th. It's not meant to be an automobile street, other than it will provide automobile access, but it's also meant to be a people street, a place where people can move through it. It can be closed off, it can be programmed, it can be detailed with the nice character that you would find in any festival area, but also provides access and circulation to set up staging and perhaps even development that would occur immediately to the east of it. So it's important to have that connection, and that's been part of all of these plans. The drawing that you see before you also represents large green spaces of lawn. It represents an area that illustrates what has been a big feature of this, and that is a water element, splash element. It's also represented an area of what we would call be an ice ribbon or an ice pond. And each of these images that you see represent different seasonal attributes of this plaza. For instance, same plaza, but now set up for farmers markets or art fairs with the tent structure. So we were trying to understand how we can activate this and illustrate that in a way that shows it can be used at all times of the year through spring, summer, fall, and winter. And as we move into the winter, you can see that that grass, which isn't real grass, it's synthetic turf, can be moved away and opened up for what we call the ice pond and the ice ribbon. So we activate those spaces. Now, in order to get to those, I will talk about later in the discussion, lots of engineering, lots of design, lots of programming, lots of special utilities that we need to think about and work through as we move into the next levels of this. But this just shows you how this becomes a year-round space. In the corner, I don't know if we can see it with this, my pointer doesn't really work on the TV screen, but in the corner, adjacent to that that new building along Oak Park Avenue is where we've identified a stage space, where we would want to see the place for music performances. And the reason we looked at that kind of that northeast corner or just the north side was the ability to blow the sound, so to speak, back towards the train and maximize the seating and visual potential of the crowds as large as we can get, bleeding out onto North Street and in fact bleeding out into the parking lot of Metro if we have events that are big enough. Obviously requires programming, obviously requires staging, but the ability to put that to the north is really important. And whether it's on the northeast, northwest, is really part of what will be a final design, and whether that stage is part of a redevelopment building or whether it's an independent stage that we buy and purchase on our own and build and set up for each of the events. So those are the things that still have to be really worked out through the process. As I mentioned, there's a whole host of elements that are part of this plan, and we had them ranked by folks as they came into our open houses. We had it ranked on our online website. The key pieces that came out, the key elements that people really gravitated to were ice, obviously, for that winter, and activating it throughout the winter months. You can see the ribbon and the pond in the upper left-hand corner. You can see a water element, whether it's just movement of water, splash, jets, simple, but to activate it during the summer months and get children and families to want to gather. Water does amazing things to bring families and kids down and bring moms down, and then moms and dads shop and buy coffee and do things while the kids are in the water. So again, thinking about activating this space. We're thinking about shelters, we're thinking about sunshade areas, we're thinking about outdoor movable furniture where people can come down here, whether it's part of an adjacent business or whether we're just putting it out for a festival, that there's moving chairs and tables and fire tables that really activate the space. And then at nighttime, the idea of bringing lighting elements into this to make it special, that when it isn't fully active, that it's a visual element of downtown that people can see when driving by or passing by on the train. So almost a landmark space for the community. Business planning and programming. As I mentioned, we went through a fairly extensive process. We had a consultant on our team, Christy Trevorov, who is a downtown business development manager in Rochester, Michigan. Very, very successful Main Street community, very active community right outside of the Detroit area. We've worked with her on a number of different projects, and we brought her in more as a special eyes and ears to focus on your community and look at it from the perspective of a downtown business manager. What does it take to program, manage? What can we get out of this that we can really get our arms around and look at it from a staffing operations, from a marketing, from a programming, maintenance, and funding standpoint? Again, back to the point that it's only as good as we're able to program this and maximize the value out of this. What we found in this process of developing this level of Plaza, with all of the components that you heard about, is we're going to need to have more support. And that support is really on the basis of some additional staffers that are dedicated to programming, managing, and taking care of this space. The idea of whether they're full-time or part-time hasn't been worked out. We haven't identified the type of person, but we know that in order to program what you're going to see as a full year of events, we're going to need a little bit more support than what we currently have working through our marketing folks right now. And also the idea of expanding our volunteer base. What we talked about was the ability to make sure that people got something out of being part of this volunteer base, and that there wasn't a burnout factor in being able to attract more people and replenish the kitty of people who want to be involved in putting on the events and programs that are out here. And also the idea of setting up some sort of nonprofit or not-for-profit type of management component that could help us run or operate this particular venue. From a marketing standpoint, one of the key things we heard about was the idea to really push the idea of an initial campaign and the idea of that ongoing electronic media of getting this area out and finding different venues to keep people activated in this space, programmed into this space, and utilizing it for really the marketing of the community above and beyond just a nice little public park space that's out there. Cross-fertilizing it with your convention center, cross-fertilizing it with your music your music components and your main music venues is a key component to really activating and making this the most beneficial space possible. We looked at a range of marketing materials. We looked at a range of ways we can promote through electronic media, local kiosks, and really start to think about these components need to be part of whatever this plaza development that we're doing is. It can't just be the development and not thinking about how we're going to program it, manage it, and sell it and communicate to the outside world. So that was really, really a critical component. And then we went back into programming, and our initial charge from Donna and her team was, I want 270 days a year of programming on this site. And we thought, well, I don't know if we can get 270 active days, but we can program this space 365 days a year throughout the seasons. The difference is taking what we have, identifying new opportunities that are out there, and there's a whole host of them that come with the splash pad idea, a whole host of them that come with the event space and movable furniture and the fire tables and the ice rink. All kinds of new opportunities that have been identified, but we thought, how can we break this down into what's active versus what's passive? And as you go throughout the year, what we started to do is put it into the seasons and say, here are the active programs throughout spring and the passive programs throughout spring. The same with summer, the same with fall, and the same with winter. And really what we found is we had about 365 days a year of passive program. There is always something, and those might be art events, those might be installations, art installations that are out there for a 3 or 4 week period. But we thought to ourselves, how do we take that and turn that into what are the active? And at the end of the day, this chart really helps define about 127 active days of programming and events. That's a lot of days in conjunction with the passive. So there is something happening all the time, but the active types of programs and events and features that we can have out there with the staff or with additional staff can be supported to about 127 events throughout the year. That's a lot. That's a lot. And we were concerned about it because we wanted to make sure that it's 127 good ones and well done and well put on. It's great to just throw it all out there, but we want to do the best we possibly can to make it very effective. The next part of this was the funding components of it. There's really two. There's the capital to build this thing, and that is the development and the construction of it, and then there are the operational components of it. And I think the key takeaways on this particular slide, and please understand that their order of magnitude as we talk about them, is the cost of building this plaza. One is the estimate that we put together based on our conceptual designs that you've seen is about $8 to $10 million worth of hard, soft, and utility costs are built into that as well. So we're not only looking at the plaza, but we're looking at utilities and what we're going to be doing as part of the North Avenue Fund, what we call a festival street. We put these other numbers up there to give you a sense of order of magnitude. It says on a national average, based on the Trust for Public Lands, which is a kind of a bellwether of all public spaces across the country that analyze public space and what they cost to build and what they cost to manage. We found that to manage really well-known destination parks across the country averages about $229,000 to $800,000 a year per acre of land. Doesn't mean your park is going to be $200,000 to $800,000, but what it's saying is there's a cost to maintaining this public land, and that's what we're trying to put out there. And for a benchmark purpose, the area that we're planning our plaza on is about 1.2 acres right now in terms of what we're working with in terms of your land that you control. Considerations going forward. So as we kind of tallied up our concept plan, as we tallied up our business plan, we wanted to put out a couple key things that were very important in the process as we move forward. One is property ownership. We are working within property that we own right now, and we are looking at some selective flips and flops so that we can make it better. There's no special story there. But what is really important is the idea that we coordinate and the synergies with our adjacent property owners and our adjacent opportunities. There is opportunity to make this plaza better, but what we are operating on right now is the idea that how do we make this happen alone in the short term? And then how do we move forward with that so that we're not unwinding things to have to spend more costs later? So we're thinking very clearly about that right now. The adaptive reuse or removal of adjacent buildings and structures. As I mentioned, it's pretty clear to us in our conversation that there was a lot of, can we keep T-Hands in the mix? We like that building. It represents our past. We have not done a detailed dive on the analytics of retrofitting, rehabbing, or restoring that building. But what we believe in our plan would be a good solution is, at a minimum, keeping that building from a vestige standpoint in terms of its outside characters, outside facade character, streetscape character, and recognizing there's value on the internal space to be adapted or retrofitted for public use. And when we built our plan, our concept was that inside space could be almost a visitor center, a warming house, our restrooms, our concessions, so that we can activate it as part of our plaza and keep a building that's important to the community in terms of character. There's an opportunity there. Can we convert it to an active business? We haven't gone down that path yet. That's a whole nother business study, but we think there's opportunity in that building to do that. And likewise, in other buildings that surround us, we need to be cognizant of whether they're in, whether they're out, or they represent an opportunity for bettering this plaza in the future. And lastly, plan public infrastructure. As we've gone through this process, Public Works Engineering made it very clear that there's some major improvements to public infrastructure that need to be coordinated as part of this plan to make it better. They were already in motion before we started that process, and we need to dovetail them in, particularly related to major sewer improvements, and make sure we're getting the most out of that as part of this process. And I think our North Avenue component of this, I think our 167th component of this, offer opportunities to improve utilities and then feed this new plaza the best way possible. Timeline and next steps, very quickly. We are at a point where we need to move into more detailed design and engineering. We've recently completed a site topographic survey, which gives us more understanding of the actual grades that are happening on the site. And we are now at a point where we need to move forward with design development, finalizing more detail in the plan, honing in on budgets, developing the documents that are necessary to bid this and construct this. We've broken this down into a couple different phases. As you can see by this diagram, the first two phases, the most important two, are phase 1 and phase 1A. One is North Street. That's where the major utilities are coming through. It's going to feed our site with the key things we need. 1A is green, and then there's another little green piece you can see kind of off to the east. Those are your parcels. There's a private parcel in between there. But we're working within 1A right now to develop that park, and we'll figure out how we can expand it as we can expand it with our development hat on later. But 1A and 1 are the first two out of the box. 1, almost a stagger starting first, and 1A closely right behind it as we're able to get into the site. Additional specialty features, I just want to point these out. While our team is capable of doing the site design, the landscape architectural design, the lights, benches, specialty features, there are a couple of key specialty elements that we need to bring our extra team members in onto. We're doing a major park like this in South Bend, Indiana right now, and we need somebody who's a specialist in ice and ice rinks. There are only a few people out there who know how to do them, and you got to get the right people to do them. And the same with water features. You got one shot at doing the water feature right, otherwise you have a pond that's out on Oak Park Avenue and everywhere else. So there's a couple key folks that we need to bring in the mix, just to put it out there, that are important components. Likewise, audio-visual. If we're going to have major sound systems out here, and we're going to build ourselves a first-class, state-of-the-art performance area, we got to bring the right type of specialty folks into the mix to support us on this venture. Did I end up on the last one? I might have ended up on the last one. Make sure.
That's the last one.
That was my last one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry for the long-winded speech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Great.
So in the board meeting, we'll move forward and talk about the proposal, but this was just to try to give you a background on what we've been doing for the past year, so it's more understandable when you start to look at the next steps of where we're going.
Anybody have any questions while he's here?
I have a couple concerns. I don't know that they're necessarily for him, though. Maybe I'll leave them for later, I guess.
Wait till the meeting? Okay.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could talk about it now if you want.
You mentioned flips and flops of property and T-hands. We don't have a decision on those, or? I mean, I think you'd probably want to have that wrapped up or decided before we move forward.
I would agree with you. However, there's two processes that run. You would like them to run parallel. In a perfect world, they never run parallel, but they run close. We have been working diligently with planning and leadership staff to better understand what the development potential of those parcels adjacent to us are, particularly the school site and what's immediately to our east. We've looked at the impact on a plaza, and we've kind of set a line, which was that north-south street that I talked about, 67th Street. We're comfortable saying that 67th is our line that we can build our park to. It's gravy and good for all if we can encroach beyond that, but we really don't have the answer to private development's needs or wishes at this time, or what that trade is with yourself and another entity. So working within the confines of what we know, the north-south line is that 67th extended for all practical purposes. If we're able to get more, it's not going to change the design other than give us more space to work within. Does that make sense? Or?
You're working with that minimal amount with thoughts that maybe can do more going forward? How does that change the planning process or the?
Well, so in order to get to the plan we had, we looked at a number of land plan scenarios of how development could occur on that site. And each of those scenarios looked at what would face our plaza, what would be above that, residential units. What would face our plaza would be commercial. We'd want commercial to be an active component facing our plaza. We'd want to activate it. We'd want to let those folks have space to put tables and chairs, because we would hope there'd be a restaurant or some sort of entertainment venue, which would probably be the most viable. We know that whatever that development would be would have loading and service. We'd want that to come off of 173rd or the curve off of North, so it'd be on the back side of our development. So we know that whatever, we can drive what that development is by saying that we want active retail frontage or visibility facing our plaza. We've created that kind of that guideline. We want there to be an opportunity that if they had extra space in that building that we could use, we could activate it with servicing of this plaza. So for instance, one of the things in the back of our mind while I said these specialty components is, if you have an ice rink, you might want to have a Zamboni. I'm just going to use that as a benchmark. So if I had a Zamboni and I'm Public Works, do I want to drive the Zamboni out every day to skim the ice? Or do I want to have the Zamboni parked in a garage that drives out onto the ice every day? And what you find in all the parks that we've worked on with ice is you want to have a garage right next to it with the Zamboni and the chiller equipment that's in it. Well, we're thinking some of that might be on our site where T-hands are, to use that as a box that we could
No,
use.
I get what you're saying. I guess my big question isn't so much as conceptualizing or trying to predict or decide where you put things. You've got this agreement, and it sounds to me like it's sort of a construction management agreement. We'll work along the way with whatever we have to try to get to the best point. This price is going to stay the same, and the deal's going to stay the same whether T-hands is part or T-hands isn't part, or there's a flip or a flop, or... Do you get what I'm saying? I love the concepts, I love the drawings, I love the ideas.
Well,
It's just
so you're
I'm a
asking
little
about-
concerned about the details.
You're asking about our contract.
That's on the...
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you
That's
were...
at the board, I mean, we're really just
No, that's fine, I understand what you're saying.
That's the preface of the board, though. I mean, this is the meeting prior to the board to
Right.
talk about it. so this is
Sure,
the time-
it's
this
fine,
would
I
be
didn't
the
know,
time
I
to
didn't know,
discuss it.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what you're, so you're asking about the contract for our design work, does it change by virtue of the land shifting this way or the land shifting that way?
Or the flip or the flop or the T-hands or the...
If we're adding 30 more feet or 40 more feet on the one side, it really doesn't change. If we're adding parcels from another area into it, and there's a new program or a new design that we've never contemplated, it would change. But for instance, the area that is the flip and the flop, those two parcels, we've already planned for that in our mind, what we'd like to see happen there. So theoretically, that's already designed. That wouldn't change anything. But there's a couple other parcels that are out there that could theoretically change.
Because that made me a little nervous. You're talking about variables that, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And you, okay.
But I'm also working off of, I have a concept plan, and I have to get direction from you as a board if this is you're comfortable with the plan and the budget and where we're going with it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
okay. Any other questions?
I'm good, Scott.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm good.
Thanks. Number 7, to receive comments from the public. Anyone wish to address the board in regards to the committee of whole?
Thank you. Just a couple questions. I love this whole idea. The only thing I am concerned about is when I hear the talk about the village or Tinley Park having ownership in a venue. Only because in Country Club Hills, they lost $5 million their first 2 years on their outdoor theater, music venue. And it's a great place. I've gone to concerts there, and I don't know what the problem is. Management, I think, is a lot of it. And so I do get concerned. I hope that you find somebody to do it, because I think it's a great idea. And one thing that even came up out of one of the other meetings I was in was having rooftop seating that could overlook the plaza, which I thought was a great idea too. But I love it all. I'm hoping that these, when they start doing building developments of residential, it's not surrounding it, and it makes it like it's theirs and takes away from the openness of it all, because I think that's going to have a big part of it. But I'm so excited about everything else to do with it. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? You don't want me to repeat that? And Brad, I wanted to ask you on just curiosity on this homeowners revenue. Do we keep that all separate? Do we record the revenue and all the expenses separately? Okay.
Yes.
I knew you would, Brad. I knew you would answer that way. And Dave, I think it's great that you're doing this whole merit thing, because I think it definitely promotes hard working. It encourages the harder working people because they benefit directly from it, and I think it's awesome that you're going that way. And do we see the financial, like the convention center, when we're talking about all the incentives, and I know we have to do it, and I think it's great with the new hotel, but how they have done in the past, is it profitable? Are they very profitable?
Well, it is something, Brad and I actually meet with them once in a year. We do review their books. Obviously, they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't profitable. And hopefully this will make it more profitable with the Sheraton and I think with the expanded group that we have now. So, and really the challenge is, as I explained at the beginning, is the taxing is what just makes this a more complicated deal than it typically would be.
And when they're expanding hotel rooms too.
Yeah, their goal is to be able to expand hotel rooms, possibly go on another site, so.
Good. That was it. That's all I was going to ask about. Thanks.
Good evening. I know you have to do the clock, but is there any way to go back to the graphic that shows the land ownership? If somebody else can keep the clock, can we, any way to do that? So from what I remember,
You want me to go ahead?
sure.
I think it was the phasing plan.
It's the last one.
Yeah.
Stuff.
There you go. So the green is village-owned.
Yes.
The white is Denler.
Yes.
The purple is Jim Fuentes, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So from the earlier rendition of it, it shows the purple portion, if I'm correct, is where the stage will be?
No.
No? So that's not, so what the other rendition where it showed the stage?
Just go east of the purple, like it'd be the northeast corner of the Phase 1A.
Okay, so that's not counting,
We used to, one of our drawings, we showed a building that was all along Oak Park Avenue that touched Tia and went all the way north to show how a building still front Oak Park Avenue to provide commercial and continuity. And it went all the way up into the purple, and the stage was always in the green.
okay, now I get it. Because I saw for sale signs on the purple section there. My other question is then about T-hands. You mentioned it could possibly be a warming center, it could be this, it could be that. Do they have the right to keep it a bar since they own it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I thought that was off the table because I didn't hear anything mentioned that could possibly just stay.
Sure.
Because maybe they want it. Okay. That's all I had. Thanks.
Motion to adjourn the committee meeting?
I'm sorry. One more.
All right.
Complimentary. Not really. I'm a vendor with the farmer's market, and my questions being, with the area that you were talking about over there, so the farmer's market that's already on Oak Park Avenue or at the train station, that's the same one that you're going to still be using?
Yeah.
It's not going to be an additional one?
We're not trying to take away, we're just trying, there's another venue for festivals and events.
Okay. Are we going to be in the grass?
Using the grass.
Vendors in the grass?
AstroTurf.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. So there's sidewalks that all those tents are on. The grass is in the center. We go back again.
Okay. Because I couldn't tell, and you were going quick.
And it's not grass, it's fake grass.
Okay. Well, right now it's fake grass,
Yeah,
but then
yeah,
it's going to
right.
be cheaper if we use
Right.
real grass. So
Yes, it will be.
then we're going to, you know what I'm saying. And if it changes up like that, personally, I want to know because I'm not going to work all year to walk in and say I can't use this spot.
No, you gotta have a hard service.
Yes, that was the initial. Thank you very much.
Part of our programming.
Okay,
and all
thanks.
Someone else? Do we have a motion to adjourn the committee meeting?
So move.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to take a couple-minute recess and start a little after 7:30 this evening, if you could bear with us.